Hello, everyone, and welcome to our PyData Trinidad and Tobago 37th meetup, FastAPI in 2025, building lightning fast APIs, Python APIs with Mr. Devon Murray. Short introduction on Devon. He is a recent computer science graduate of the University of West Indies, graduating with first-class honors as the top computer science students of 2024. Give him a hand. Maintain academic excellence throughout the university, earning a place on the Dean's Honor Roll for all 3 years of study. Currently, Devon serves as a part-time tutor and software developer at UE. He mentors kids in programming fundamentals. And Devon is passionate about building high-performance applications. That's why he's teaching us a little bit about FastAPI. And he currently is working independently on multiple software products focusing on modern web technologies and API development. So everyone say hi to Devon and give him a hand. All right. And before we begin on and let Devon take it away, we're going to read our PyData Code of Conduct from NumFocus. So, as always, please be kind to others. Do not insult or put down others. Behave professionally. Remember that harassment and sexist, racist, or exclusionary jokes are not appropriate for PyData Trinidad and Tobago or NumFocus. So all communication should be appropriate for a professional audience, including people of many different backgrounds. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate. We've never had that problem, so that's great. So NumFocus is dedicated to providing a harassment-free community for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. We do not tolerate sexual harassment of community members in any form. Thank you for helping make this a welcoming and friendly community for us all. So with that, let's take away our esteemed guest, Devon Murray, as he tells us a little bit more about FastAPI and building some really cool, really fast Python APIs in 2025. Take it away, buddy.
All right, so thanks for the great introduction. So I'm just get straight into it. So from my wording right here, so what is FastAPI? So FastAPI is a modern, fast, and high-performance web framework for building APIs. It is built on standard Python type hints. It handles 3,000 plus requests per second. This is the performance of it, and it has automatic documentation generation. This is something that I really love about it. And what else I really love is the exceptional developer experience as well. So today I'll just be breaking down a simple complete to-do API. All right, I'll just be showcasing the automatic API documentation, some type safety and data validation with Pydantic. I'll be using, well, since FastAPI is fast, it's also built on with support for asynchronous task handling. And it also includes background tasks and real-time features. And I'll just talk about some real-world use cases and production examples. All right, so let me just get straight into it. I'll just head over to the code setup. So currently I'm running around 527 lines of code just to set up this endpoint right here. So to start a FastAPI website, it's a simple FastAPI dev well, and the name of the app to see. Okay, so I'll just start up this API right here. And in the printout here, you could see that I have some messages. Now, FastAPI is, well, it comes built in with a lot of free stuff that you wouldn't really expect a framework to come with. So if I just scroll down to my lifespan setup here, you could see that in this lifespan setup, I simply just initialize my database and I just create a sample to do, all right, only if one doesn't exist. And essentially this method here just runs whenever I start the FastAPI app. So stuff like, for example, if you want to connect to a Firebase or a Supabase setup, you can literally connect your Firebase or your Supabase every single time or have it run a certain sort of workflow every single time you initialize your FastAPI app. Now, this is just something really simple and resourceful about FastAPI. Now, the most resourceful thing I have found is the documentation. So this right here, everything you see here is auto-generated. I didn't write any line of code that would essentially give this sort of front end. So it gives a full documentation and groupings of your parts and stuff like that. Full documentation of the data you can send, the data you can receive. It also has authentication locked in on it as well. Okay, so I'll just be going through this documentation here for some bits mostly, and then I'll get down into the code to showcase more of it right here. So this is basically just built on fast APIs, well, not fast APIs, but Python type hints and Pydantic models, right? So this is not really just documentation, but it's a fully functional testing environment. So every endpoint, like I said before, is documented with request schemas, response models, and you can test everything right here in your browser without needing to create a front end for yourself. So something else I'd like to show is that it also has a different form of documentation. So if you go to this ReDoc route, you could see this documentation here is like an alternative format of the documentation. And these two different document styles, both generated automatically and both always in sync with our code. Right? So I would just see in maybe if you're using Flask or Django or something else, you'd need to most likely install a extension or something like that to develop all of this. And most of the time, you'd have to add a little bit more just to get stuff like this. But FastAPI really and truly just gives you this straight out of the box. And I forgot to say that while I'm going through this, you could ask questions so I could like sort of explain anything else. And yeah, that's really it. Yeah. So I have some simple authorization. It's just some bearer token authorization. And my token isn't really anything special. It's just a normal string that I use to essentially authorize into the system. So as you can see, we have some sort of icons here that shows unlocked. Now, if I was to say go to one of these protected routes, all right, and try to essentially run this setup, you'd see that I get a not authenticated setup right here. Now, this here is handled via dependency injection. And when I get into the code, I'll show more of how this is exactly implemented. So this authentication as well also happens before the user even steps to our route. So it happens, it validates the user, it ensures that that user could go to that route. And if there's a user role setup, or if you have like some sort of user role setup, it will show that as well. Okay. So let's just authorize into the system here. I'll just put in my bearer token, and you'd see that we now have a locked icon showing up here. So now let's just simply create a to-do task, right? So all of this here, right, basically shows us exactly what we need to do. So FastAPI essentially guides us to what exact data is needed and the type of which data is needed as well. Right. So as you can see here in this setup here, the interface knows that a title is required. Right. The priority must be one of the three specified values, either low, medium, or height. And the due date, it expects a proper date time format, right? And it also says that though it has a max, or not a max, but an optional description here, you could specify how much characters the description could have as well. So this is just based on like simple Python type hints combined with Python, well, Pydantic validation. So I'll just copy and paste some demo data into the setup here. So you could see we have a simple title, description, priority, and so on. So I'll just execute this. And as you can see here, let's look at this response. So FastAPI, right? We have this generated UID. Well, I set that up to be generated, and it sets up some timestamps, and it also initializes this specific to-do to the start of pending. Right now, this specifically was handled all by our Pydantic model. So this also is done through dependency injection. So when we put this, say, into the parameters of the route, we essentially capture all of this data very easily, and it does all the validation without us having to actually write any code for that. So I'll just do another example of the setup here. I'll just take out this actually good data and put in some bad data that I know would give us some actual wrong code. So for the title, as you know, it's a required 1 to 200 characters. The description isn't really required, and we have a wrong priority and a wrong due date. So if I were to execute this, you'll see here in the response body, we have a well-detailed error listing of what happened. So firstly, we could see here that we have like a string too short. It basically says that the title is too short. It gives you the exact location where the error happened, and it gives you a short message saying that the string should have at least one character and some more context about the validation. Now, what I would say is this is very good. This validation here happens before our code even runs. So it wouldn't necessarily cause like a crash in the code or any silent failure, or you wouldn't have much issues trying to debug how or where the data went wrong. So it essentially makes the API sort of bulletproof automatically. So you really don't have to worry much about the type of data that is coming in. You just have to know that FastAPI by default protects your API with most likely have to import another package or write your own data validation and write out your specific messages that you want to give to the user. But in FastAPI, like I said, this is very simple. You get errors out just like that. And in your front end, maybe you built it out with Next.js or React. You can literally do some JS to pass this return string and give the user what I would say is meaningful feedback before they actually try to submit the data again. So this here is a really good aspect about FastAPI I really wanted to emphasize here. So let's just move on into some more aspects of FastAPI. So now let's talk a little bit about performance. Now I don't have benchmarks and stuff like that. I didn't really do much of that. But what I really did was just to show you the simplicity of I would say is development and the development experience essentially. So let me just create another to do, right? And I'll just show the code from here, just the terminal mostly. Right, so let me just put this side by side just for a bit. Right, so it's side by side there. And I'll just create another to do. So before I even do this, let's just run through what my create to do method does. So in my create to do method, I'll run through a bit about how the method here works and what the dependency injection is before I really get down into this here. So you could see here, we have a definition of how the route here works, and it's a post method. We specify that what the route should be. We could also specify the response model, the status code that should return if there's an error or if there is good and such. And we could also specify tags. This is essentially what essentially groups our routes here together. And in the parameters of our method here, you could see that we have to do and to do create. Now, this to do create is essentially our Pydantic model. So if I was to click on this and get it up here, you could see we defined this model. And this is all we did to essentially get all of this well-documented data right here. All we did was specify that the title should be a string, have a minimum length of 1 and a max of 2, and that's really just it. We have this documentation here. And for the rest of the data, you could see here as well, we specified what these stuff could be and can't be as well. So if I just go back to my create method right here, if we just zoom through it here for a bit, we also have the background task. This is fully functional, straight out the box from FastAPI. And this here essentially just runs the task you specify without blocking the main thread that the user is communicating with. So this happens in the background without even the user knowing or something like that. It's sort of like a fire and forget, but you could also likewise implement stuff like Redis and stuff like that to get information about if the background task actually ran or not. So here you could see I'm just simply creating my to-do in the database. I'm committing it, and that's really just it. But the background task here is essentially what I want to showcase. So background task.add task, and we specify the method that we want to essentially just run. And we also specify any parameters that this method will take. So if I go here, I'll just increase this sleep time. So let's just say around 5 here. And this will essentially allow this here to run in the background and have our system return without any issues. So let's just set up this correctly. So learning FastAPI, and I'll just specify the correct priority and a date. Let me just copy and paste what I had before so we can move a little bit faster here. Okay, so looking at the terminal for a bit here, let me just open it a little bit extra. You'd see that this executes and we get a response, and after the amount of time that I set here, this email will be sent after that. So we're just simulating it for just a bit. So you can see here, we got a response. You could see that this here shows up as well. And after our predefined time, which was like 5 seconds or so, we get email sent successfully. Now, this here is really great. So the reason why I say this is really great is because of the aspects where you want to actually send an email, you want to do some heavy background processing. Now, I wouldn't see background processing such as running an ML model or something like that could be run from this background task. Maybe Celery or something should be needed for that. And likewise, FastAPI allows those third-party apps to be integrated with it easily as well. So like I said, this background task would work easily for any minor stuff, even for extensive stuff as well. So where you want to say like query the database for something, do something extra in the database, you could use this background task easily, and it is also async as well. Okay, so let me just move on into some more aspects of this setup right here. So next, you just want to complete a to-do to just see more a bit about how FastAPI works. Okay, so let's just head over here and let's just take this to-do ID. And let's just try this out, slap this in here, and we complete this to-do. So you can see here, we get the same setup here again, and it's also sending our email notification in the background as well. Okay, so just to reiterate, these responses are always instant. So the async by default setup in FastAPI allows this to be very, very fast. So uh, what is really impressive about this is that FastAPI, like I said before, benchmarks to show over 3,000 requests per second or to handle 3,000 requests per second. And this here is comparable to other frameworks such as Node.js and Go as well. And we also get some sort of C level performance, but with Python's simplicity. So you get that nice close to English development like setup, and you get the performance of C as well. And the secret is that FastAPI is built on Starlet and UVcorn using ASGI instead of the traditional WSGI like Flask and Django. So this essentially just means true async support and not any threading workarounds that some other frameworks utilize. Okay, so we also have a little bit more few setup here. Let's just go over to this get to dos. So as you can see here, we have some query parameters. And this also documented it well as well. So this just says here to retrieve to-dos with optional filtering and pagination. So these here also get documented really well. So if I were to go down to my setup for this method, you can see here, all we do is essentially just specify what we want in the parameters as well. And this is all done easily with dependency injection. So we get all our query parameters and we specify that only logged in users can access this method, as well as we want to pass the DB session to this method here as well. Okay, so this interactive setup here, like I said, all auto-generated. So it gives you a better testing interface so you can get stuff done really quickly. So let's just essentially specify what we want here. So let's just say we want pending to-dos and with a medium priority. And let's not just change the skip and the limit. And we specify that, or we have none. So I'll just remove that there. And let's just specify. And also, well, we now get this one to do right here. So I don't have a lot of to-dos right here, but I'm just showcasing that you could set up simple query parameters easily without any much hassle. And you could also validate these query parameters as well. And this is done by importing FastAPI's query model right here and just using the parameters of this query model or query class, I should say, to essentially define what these query parameters should be and what they should be validated as. And just to reiterate, these are all validated before even reaching the system. So stuff in terms of security, where someone sends, like intentionally just sends bad stuff to your API just to see if it will break, FastAPI protects you without you even, well, knowing it, of course. So all of this is done on the job. So every single thing here queried, not queried, I would say, but validated. And it also, I'll just reiterate again, it protects your code. So it wouldn't necessarily put into your code, like just to see this skip and limit here, it maybe wasn't queried, not queried, but validated before entering the system. So let's just say the user said like a limit of 1,000, and you actually have tens of thousands of data on your system. Now, you don't want to essentially allow the user to get 1,000 data back at once. That would sort of bring down your system. Well, not really fast API because it's fast, of course, but just in a regular setup of a actual system, you don't want to limit the user to, let's just see here, 100 records per page request. So this also gives some nice validation here as well. There's also path validation as well. I didn't really go through much of this here, but It's all documented in FastAPI's documentation. All right. So let's just move on into other aspects of this setup right here. So I'll just go down and essentially showcase this WebSocket connection, right? So Fast APIs isn't just about the REST API itself. So it also supports simple WebSocket connection as well. So we have our WebSocket endpoint down here. Let me just get to it exactly. All right, so this is our simple WebSocket endpoint, and it provides real-time to-do statistics. So in our real application, this could push like live updates to our dashboard and notify users of changes and or stream real-time data. Sort of working like a webhook per se. All right. So the beautiful thing is that the WebSocket support is built into Fast API's async architecture. Right. So let me just repeat that. It's built into the async architecture. This means that it doesn't block your system at all. So you could run this for like a simple live chat interface without any issues. So no additional libraries and no complex setup, just a simple calling of the connection manager and setting up your WebSocket endpoint. And as you can see here, it's a specialized web endpoint on this app setup right here. So that's just basically it here. I would say I didn't really go into much of using the WebSocket. I know how to use it, a little bit of it, but to essentially use it actually in a project or something like that, I never really did it, but I plan to do it in the future. Okay, so to test out this WebSocket here, I'll just be using a simple demo script that also tests out some more of the routes as well. So let me just run this setup here. So if I were to go in another terminal here, and let's just run this other file. Okay, type the wrong thing. Right, so at this point here, you could see uh, it's just connected for a short while, but uh, if I go back to the top. So I just did a little demo script that I could provide to you all afterwards. So this just essentially run requests against our API. So it just runs some simple requests just like this here. So instead of creating a demo script like I did right here, I just did this for testing purposes. You could just use the automatic documentation that Fast API provides. Okay, so if I scroll along back to the WebSocket connection, I don't really have it working for exact setup here. But as you can see here from the code setup, we are essentially connecting to the exact endpoint for our WebSocket. And we are just printing out some debug statements to showcase that, okay, the WebSocket is connecting. And when we actually get that connection, we are saying it is connected, it is listening for real-time updates, and it's only waiting for at least 3 messages before ending the connection. Now, this here could be kept forever. Like I said, for a simple setup for a live chat application as well. So down here in the printouts here, you could see this setup here. And I'm not sure if you saw it when I run it, but I'll just run it again. So it waits for time and it just says it receives for more and so on. And all of this is handled simply with just doing this simple setup here. Now, for extensive code like an actual chat setup, this may be longer for sure, right? It's really may be longer, but it's really simple to get started on using WebSockets and stuff like that. So I will just, in the remainder of time here, just run through this code for a bit. So just to reiterate on some of the simple stuff that we have here, uh, let me just get to the database setup. So before I even go back up there, I use SQL Alchemy, right? Now, FastAPI is equipped to run with any single, I wouldn't say any single thing, but it's equipped to run with most ORMs. And I learned SQL Alchemy and I find it's really great. So you could use SQL Alchemy or any other setup that you want. There's also this other setup which name is SQL model. Now, this SQL model is built with FastAPI, not FastAPI, but Pydantic. So you don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel again, sort of in a way where you are trying to set up Pydantic models. So in SQL model, though I don't have an explanation right here, reason being is because it's relatively new. The ecosystem is very small. Though it's created by the same developer for FastAPI, the ecosystem is very small. So I wouldn't really recommend using it for anything big and extensive. Just like all of right SQL model built into FastAPI, or built for FastAPI, I would say, is defined just like this right here. So you don't have to define an extra model just to handle your validation and stuff like that. So that's just another side point I like to emphasize right here. So though I said SQL model is really well, this also is really great as well. So this sort of gives you some sort of abstraction away from the actual database model. So after creating this, you just create a replica as to show what will be needed here. Also, with Pydantic setups here, maybe you wanted, let's just say, this is just the to-do create. And for the to-do response, you could simply just, instead of calling the entire base model all over again, you could simply just pass in to-do create, and it would essentially fill out all of these, I would say here, attributes without you having to redo them again. And this is another neat feature of it as well. So all of this simple lines of code where you just specify what type of data it should be, if it should be optional or required, or if it should be a certain length, or it should be less than a certain length of such like that. These all get automatically documented into lines like these to help end users simply test your app without much, I would say, confusion as to what is needed as well. Now, if I just scroll along into a little bit of this here as well, these schemas are also showcased on the platform here as well. So you see all the priority setups here and all the I would say is available priorities that you could choose from. You could see all the descriptions. Like I said, automatic documentation for free. You really don't have to write anything that much, I would say. So when you're defining these Pydantic models, this is all you really need to do. Define what validation you want and a short description, and you get it for free. And you get it for free. Okay. So just to add to that, FastAPI also provides error handling as well. So if I were to simply go down to the usage of this HTTP exception, right? So you could see here, we just want to send a simple notification. So if we just specify, okay, we need this notification to be sent for this to do, and this to do is not actually in our database, we could simply just raise this simple HTTP exception class here with the specification of our error code and our detail, right? Now this here, FastAPI automatically formats this as proper JSON response with the right status code. So no manual response building, basically, and no forgetting about setting the actual content types of your response. So you don't really have to worry about much. And this is the developer experience I was talking about previously. So even here per se as well, you could simply just return a JSON setup right here, and it's no issue. FastAPI does all the work for you as well. So your clients essentially just get consistent error formats across the entire API. So I will just talk a little bit about the authentication, though it is very, very simple. So let me just scroll up to the actual implementation of it here. So like I did before, I tried to access one of these endpoints without actually logging in, and you could see that FastAPI just told me I can't authenticate. And just to reiterate again, this authentication is done before anything in the route happens, of course. So anything malicious towards your system is handled very easily by FastAPI. Okay, so let me just go over this setup here a bit. So, so all our endpoints which are protected just simply needs a current user, right? So this setup here is a dependency injection. So what this does is it extracts the token and it basically validates it from here, and it returns the specific error, again, another HTTP exception, and we could specify what we want as well. Right now, this is just a very simple HTTP bearer. This is dependent on if uh, aspects like where you have an actual front end that does some sort of validation and stuff like that. But if you want full validation on the FastAPI endpoint here as well, you could also include stuff like OAuth2, JWT, and even API keys as well. And I personally have been using OAuth2 as well. So OAuth2 is really nice as coupled with this dependency injection. So this get current user, right, is simply called by our method, which is just depends. So when we specify this depends get current user, if you go into the definition here, it takes a single dependable callable basically a function. And from what FastAPI says here is not to call it directly. FastAPI will call it for you. Okay, so like I said, this is just the basics of dependency injection. If I go to get database, this is a setup for the database here as well. It specifies our session local and essentially just yields the database. So after we have done every single thing in that route that requires the database, this would be run automatically for us. So it will essentially just close that connection for that request, and that's just it. Now, something I really didn't add here also is that you could also set up asynchronous database connections. Now, that is a little bit more advanced. I didn't really go into it that much. Like I said, documentation for FastAPI, I would say it's really, really well done, and you get to learn about it and want to learn about it, but learn about things very easily without much of a hassle. Okay, so uh, let's just move on into some more other aspects of FastAPI. So to set up things like, let's just see, CORS support, FastAPI has it inbuilt as well. And we could specify our CORS origin. Let me just get to the exact setup here. So you could see here on the app that we developed here, we specify this is a FastAPI app with some other setups here. And we could specify here, we want some middlewares. Maybe you want a middleware to check a route for a certain data or something like that, or to redirect a certain route, or just to do some checking or route monitoring before requests are made to your system. You could set up these middlewares here as well. Now in production, this would allow origins would essentially take a list of all the origins that would be allowed into your system. So this is just a simple overview of how the middlewares here work as well. All right. So I would say this was a simple, complete overview of Fast API here. Now, this is all in just a single file. Now, from my reading of the documentation, I haven't really seen a opinionated way of how to essentially use Fast API or how to have like a clean setup for an architecture for how you could utilize Fast API really well. But I came across a video on YouTube, like while I was learning it as well, and I saw one that really uses this setup here well. They say it's like the model view controller setup, but I would see it differently. It's more like a model view controller, but with a service layer. And it sort of essentially defines what the setups should be differently. So if I go over into this setup here, you can see that we essentially are abstracting everything away for what it should be. So the entities, or you could call it just the models, are just the actual database models. Now, this code here isn't actually mine. This is code that I got from that YouTube video, and I just really liked it. So I just say, let me just showcase it here as well. So these entities are just the definitions of what our models actually are. Okay. And these actual abstractions here, or I would say a package, essentially just encapsulate every single thing about a to-do. It encapsulates the routes for a to-do. It encapsulates the models, or I would just say the Pydantic models, and it also encapsulates the controllers. Normally I say these are the controllers, but the services that essentially works on the model to get our data out. Okay, so this setup here is really well laid out, and it's a good starting point for Fast API. It includes login. It has a database set up really neatly, same as like I have it set up here as well. And you can also specify that you want like a Postgres SQL, or you want a simple SQLite database like I used to demo in my demo right there. And for auth, let me just go up into what auth really is. So if I go down into the service, like I was saying before, it also includes OAuth 2 setup here. So in this setup, you could see here that we have these services. So these methods here essentially are everything that is used for authentication. So if I was to go to, let's just say, the register method right here, you could simply see that we are also getting some of our dependencies from our controllers. So here we could see that on our register user, we are passing this dependency for the database, and we send it over to our register user, and this essentially just uses that database connection until completion. And like I said before, after this has done, it would be closed off. Right. So some other setups here, as I'm going through it here, you could see we have the bicrypt setup here to essentially just hash our passwords before storing it into the database. And you could see this here does verifications of our password, and this here sets up essentially gets the hash for our password as well. So we have some authentication for the user here as well. And with this setup, it's a bit different for how the authentication works. It actually gives an email and a password setup on the front end. So by just simply specifying that this route, not this route, but this one below here, essentially has a dependency for the OAuth 2 password request form. In our authentication pop-up here, a simple email and password fields, or simple email and password fields will be included for the user to simply just log in. And you don't really necessarily need a hard-coded JWT token of the sorts. So I would say this setup here, this clean architecture setup here is really nice if you really want to get started on Fast API. And that would really just end it off there for my demo of the Fast API here. And any questions into any aspects of this framework,